Hello, everyone. Welcome. We're going to give people a few minutes to filter in. We're going to wait until 2 minutes past the hour and then get started. Looks like our very own Cy Robbins has logged in as a co-host and not an attendee.
Hi everyone. I think that the chat is open. So if anyone wants to say hi.
Yeah, we're going to get started in just a minute or two. Let some people filter in. We are East Coast time, so hopefully everyone is enjoying their lunch. Ron's, how's the weather where you're at up in New Haven?
It's been pretty nice. It's a nice it's a listen, if anybody wants to come to Connecticut, this is June is a good month to do it. September, everybody's October, November, leaf peeping, all of that. Um, but September's got the light, the water's still warm, pizza is delicious. Everything comes together.
Hey, I just got told that the chat is disabled. So let's see. Panelists can chat with everyone. Attendees can chat with everyone. All right, the chat should now be open. All right, great. Rob says woohoo. Saber says hi. We've got some people in the chat. We're a few minutes past the hour. Franz, what do you say we get this machine started?
Let's give the people what they want. They want to hear about AI
That's
in universities.
absolutely,
Let's do it.
absolutely. And that's Apple Intelligence, right? That's what we're talking about today. No, that is not what we're talking about today.
No,
We're talking about artificial
we're talking about
intelligence.
open source.
Yes.
We're talking about the web world and communication world, and we're talking about how AI can make like tangible, practical effects for like not just the dissemination of knowledge, but like the operations of what it means to do communications, what it means to like kind of run things. So I'm looking forward to talking about it.
Me too. Me too. We've done a lot of work getting AI into Yale, but first, I think we need to make introductions so people know who we are. So, Franz, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Hi, my name is Franz Hartl. I'm from Yale University, where I am the associate director for University Web Operations, where we manage the majority of Yale's kind of web infrastructure, and we manage it through a platform called Yale Sites. I've been hanging around the Drupal community for a little while now, and it's really nice to see like kind of where things are going, and especially it's so nice to see what like a kind of like collaborative effort we have in the higher ed space about like kind of the web world and the way that we share everything. It's really cool.
Awesome. And I am Randy Ost. I am the creative director at Four Kitchens. I helped work with Yale on a multi-year project, getting Yale sites up and modernized and integrating AI into Yale itself. You may have heard me give talks on this subject at MidCamp and at DrupalCon this year. If you haven't, that's fine. We're going to go over a lot of that material here today and kind of take you through a project from start to finish. So I do want to say that I very much enjoy the relationship that Four Kitchens and Yale has and how we're able to work together on these communications and AI and development opportunities and how we're able to bring our teams together and work in concert to like move a lot of this stuff forward and to bring all of this into the public spaces, to be able to bring this out into open source. So I think that the first thing that we should talk about just a little bit is what Yale Sites is, because it's going to build into what we did with the AI. So, Franz, do you want to give a quick summary of what Yale Sites is?
Sure. Yale Sites is our kind of custom web design and publishing platform that we make through the university. And it's a way that we have a system that allows us to kind of manage at scale the majority of individual websites. So at Yale, if you're an academic unit, if you're an organization, you are given a website and that's centrally funded, and that website has all the tools that you need to kind of communicate whatever your strategy is for that department, and to do it with the Yale visual identity, and to do it in a way that's really accessible for people. And what we've done is we've worked in, and the modern Yale, we've been building this out for well over a decade now. But the version that we're at now provides like kind of like a Wix or like a Squarespace type of authoring experience, and that's coupled with kind of like using Drupal and the most cutting edge, and with 4Kitchens using some of the most cutting edge kind of content management Drupal strategies. And so we've made all of those of it. We've come together to put this all together, and then we have it where, since we have this model where we have this like kind of network and everything to get together, we're able to have continuous updates throughout the platform. So we're working with 4Kitchens, and we kind of have this whole elaborate like continuous improvement deployment thing. So long story short is, like, Yale Sites is kind of like that Wix or Squarespace for Yale that allows us all kind of work together, and also allows us to kind of control the visual identity and accessibility of Yale's web presence.
That's awesome. And it's a lot of work, and it does a fantastic job of managing the content for the website. I'm a big fan of Drupal. I've been, a member of like the Drupal Association for a long time. I donate money, time, all of this stuff to Drupal to make sure that everything is open. And one of the things that I really like about Drupal is how easy it is to use content, to distribute content, and to bring that about.
Yeah.
I'm about to get on a rant, and I'm going to stop for a moment because I realized there's one thing that I didn't mention, and that is everyone who is watching this. If you have a question, there is a Q&A. The Q&A should be open. Actually, it is, because I've seen a couple of questions from one of our attendees, Rob, and I want to let you know, ask the questions that you have. I'm going to be paying attention to this space. I'm going to try and bring your questions into the conversation. So if there's something that you need clarity on, please ask a question. We'll take care of it and answer it live. And if it makes more sense to address later, we'll let it sit until we come to the right spot in the show today. So, all right. With that, I'm now going to begin my rant. It's not really a rant. I want to tell the story of how AI kicked off, because Franz, you may have a different perspective on this than I do, but it felt to me like you had a conversation with 4Kitchens, with us, and you were like, "Hey, there's a lot going on in the AI space. A lot of people are playing with it. There's a lot of fantastic things going on with it. You saw that there was opportunity to get people answers to questions, to like have human readable queries responded with human readable answers. And you were like, hey, I want to integrate this into Yale Sites. I want to do it quickly so that we can have a proof of concept." And we're like, yes, that sounds fantastic. We'd love to do it. We can start putting together this project plan. And then like you drop this bomb, you're like, and 5 weeks is the deadline.
I think it's a testament that we're also kind of, it was a few sprints, because we've been working together there. And so it's important to have like these relationships. And to have like kind of Yale's, we're in a good position to do it because Yale's made a lot of investments. We've been lucky to have that into building this kind of workflows. But I do think a lot of the tooling is here, and it's a little bit easier to do. I think is one of the things that we came through, and we'll kind of show you what kind of we did. But really, look, if you're on the web team and your communication teams, if you have Drupal there, you're really in a good position to start taking advantage of some of these, what in AI is called RAG, and that's retrieval augmented generation. It's essentially, hey, can you kind of like take the content on your website and optimize it so an AI could kind of use it to have a chat interface with. And really, and then we where I think you, Randy, you guys really kind of came in is that I think one of the most important things about this stuff is the user experience that people are having.
Yes.
We take a lot of pride in like that, and I think where it was is like some of these questions about how it appears, how you interact with it, how you think about your content, and how you present your content, and that it was really it was very impressive, the work that you did in the design space there.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, it was a phenomenal challenge, and one that the team like came together and really I think did a phenomenal job. First, with the basis of having like good content to start with and feeding that into the RAG architecture, like you mentioned, and being able to train AI on your own content, like being able to dynamically have like whenever a website is updated, that content pushes into the RAG, gets processed, and the updates are immediate, which is really nice. So that means that like users of the website didn't have to make any changes to their workflow, or at least very small changes to their workflow.
Yeah.
We'll talk about like content improvements that we recommend a little bit later on, but that content goes into the RAG architecture,
Yeah.
and that process from a technical standpoint isn't particularly challenging. The more challenging aspect of it is the interface and the testing portions of
Yeah.
building a tool. So like the interface portion for the project that we initially did, we used I believe we were using a product from Microsoft, and Microsoft provided a chat interface, kind of like a little React app that we inserted into Drupal in a block. And that React app is what did the chatting back and forth with the RAG and with the AI service. We reskinned that to make it its own identity within Yale, and and that was again that's kind of
Yeah.
skills that as web designers and developers that's very common, very easy to predict. What ended up taking the most time, I think, as part of this process, was the testing of the generative AI, like being able to
Yeah.
ask questions and get answers back.
Yeah.
We've all heard of hallucinations and making sure that content is wrong. Whenever it came to the chat interface, you know, what were some of the kind of decisions that went into testing, Franz?
Okay, so this is so for people who are being under pressure to kind of to release or have questions or want to know what some of the concerns are. Generative AI is a different form of computing than what we're used to. We're because generative AI is non-deterministic, right? Every time you interact with it, you're giving it the information, you're going to get a different response, and that is going to make QA and a lot, and the way that we judge something different in the computer space. Usually, if you're in the IT side, you're worried about the accuracy and like kind of consistency of your project. Are you at 5 nines? You know, is there any failure? Is all the numbers accurate? With AI and what we're doing here is we're doing something that's where you want kind of things that are unstructured to get structured. You want to kind of ask questions, you want to get answers. That means you have a different measure of safety, and you have different values of things that you want to look at. And I think the NIST, if you know NIST from cybersecurity, NIST goes with, you know, what the goals aren't accuracy, they're trustworthiness, and you know, there a lot of it has to do with trustworthiness, and you want to make sure that the answers that you're getting are kind of correct, especially, and you want to have an understanding of what the risks are. So like the systems that we have a lot of pain for that we're developing for, it's like we're developing a chat bot using this technology to that we should show people soon, Randy. The people need to see.
Absolutely.
But we're using it to answer kind of questions, Randy. And I was talking to you a little bit about this. Like we get questions about somebody wanted to ask about the death, like the death benefit, like spousal benefits. Their husband died, and then the bot just was like, "Yeah, whatever. Here's the policy." The bot didn't have any empathy for it. We want
Well,
to
I mean, it
ask
is a
some,
robot, right?
there, you know, this these are again, it's something that we haven't it's something that we haven't really seen today. I mean, these are these things have persona. For user experience people, they have personas.
Mm-hmm.
You could get they have a voice, they have that, and that's when people talk about prompt engineering, you hear that. I'm sure people have heard that phrase a little bit. It's about, hey, what is the voice, what is the tone, what things are you going to have to look at? Like, all right, you're going to look at all these manuals, how are you going to describe these manuals, what are the risks involved, and all this stuff is system instructions and the creation of agents. And yeah, it's a whole new world, man, Randy.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to share the tool so that everybody has a little bit more context of what we're looking at, because I actually want to call out one thing that we have built into the system that helps us
So,
to
I
have
just want to
confidence
talk.
and trust. Oh, good.
This is a
Okay.
couple of things that we're seeing here, Randy. If you're just before
Yeah.
you just, I just really I want to take the opportunity. So this
Yeah,
is
please.
so this was Yale Sites, right? So we were tasked with kind of building a website in like 4 weeks or something to get this stood up. Like AI, like the university has made a big announcement about AI. The university has said we're spending 115 million over the next 5 years on AI and all different facets, from hardware, software, in the classroom, grants, all that. It's Yale. It's very proud of Yale stepping up and to kind of help figure out this space. But we were able to spin up a website like this and think about content because of Yale Sites. And you see this is like, see how all the visual identity is here, everything. So this is the system in action, that we have here. So I wanted to plug that. This is the CMS.
Awesome. Yeah. So being able to spin up a page like this that's very quick, it's very nice. Let's take a look at the chatbot. So on this website, ai.yale.edu, if you click on chat with this website, this interface pops open and it's kind of a full screen takeover. And part of the reason why it was designed as a full screen takeover was so that it could be dropped into any Yale site, and be a distinct and managed experience. Um, and then we've got some prompts here, but whenever we click on one of the prompts, what it's going to do is it's going to begin doing research and it's going to give us back information. But as Franz had mentioned, we want to maintain trust with the people who are using the interface, and we want to make sure that the content that they're being provided are actually going, is the right information. And we do that at the very top of the chat here. You see, we have citations. And if you click on the citation, it shows you where it got the information that it pulled from. So, like, for instance, this response right here, which was the question, how can I explore AI at Yale? It gives us 4 citations so that we can fact check the responses that come back. And so that allows us to have more confidence in the platform and the answers that we're getting back. Now, this question is just how can I explore AI at Yale? But as Franz said, whenever you're trying to find out benefits information, if you're a staff member at Yale, you want to make sure that that information is accurate. And so citations is a very important part of this. Now, we're talking about a little bit about content right now because the source of the content goes into this so that we can have citations. And Amy asks a really good question in the chat, which is, how do you define good content? Like, other than human readable, how does content need to be structured to be retrievable? And honestly, the best thing that you can do is write good content for people. it surprised me because I expected there to be like some kind of like breakdown or assignments, but the reality is that you feed it content that makes sense to a human. So I'm going to go to this is good.
Yeah, I think
Oh,
I think that there's also something else that we're learning a little bit, Randy. I think that this is there, like making everything clear there. But there has been a couple of, so I think, so the standard of good content, right, is like an effective communications
mhm.
is getting the right information to the right people at the right time. So that's always kind of how we judge the effectiveness and the way, and so the way that we've done that a lot in the past for people who are kind of creating content on the web has been, we're optimizing for scannability, we're optimizing for like kind of a scroll culture. We're doing a lot of those things there. When you're optimizing for AI there, you're going to be optimizing for kind of completeness, because you don't know, like, so we previously, what we've been doing is we've been going for like kind of that 80% or that 70%. You just having, because if you overwhelm the user, if you overwhelm the reader, they are not, they won't parse it. But now we're going to a whole new paradigm of how we're going to start interacting with information, right? We're going to want to have conversational RAG based information. It's going to blow everything else that we've had in the past away. And when you do that, if you think about like getting that right, if you're going to think about what is trustworthiness and reliability, and if you're going to have that right citation, if you're going to find that needle in the haystack, you have to have the whole haystack. You have to have all this information. So you're going to have a whole big, like, the way that you write is going to have to be different. The second thing is I think that what is really good quality information has always been a big, like, for my communication people out there, it's always been a hard time, because how do you tell somebody that their writing is inadequate? How do you kind of convey that what you think, this is confusing, this is it's very difficult to do QA on this. Now with AI, you're going to be able to see what is good quality content. Good quality content, remember, if we're getting the right information to the right people at the right time, it would, through a chat, it should be able to answer your question. If the chatbot is not answering the question, maybe it's a little bit with the system instructions, but it's not going to be the model. It's not going to be like anything on this GPT-4 level model is going to be able to kind of really answer it. If you don't have the answer, it's because we finally have kind of a test to see if it's there. The third thing I want to say about what is really good quality content. Really good quality content is content that is accessible. So when you say, oh, it's human readable, it's also machine readable. Like, and what I mean by accessible, I mean like kind of like WCAG 2.1 kind of accessible, because that means you have really good markup. It's really clearing up something. Your H2s mean something. Your bullet points means something. And when you're passing this up, when we're passing it up to the AI to kind of go into the RAG architecture, when we have that markdown up there, it's going to be able to kind of get a better answer for the bot, because the bot's going to be able to say, oh, I know where this new paragraph is. Oh, look at that. That's an H2 header. That's giving context and explaining what this next two paragraphs is. So it's understanding of there is there. So it's really kind of exciting, because we're entering in an era where we really could kind of start to we're entering in an era where we could kind of really start to do QA and evaluation of content that's not just like vibes based.
Absolutely. One of the things that one of the things that I found amusing whenever we first set this up, let's see, hold on. Okay. So one of the things that happened whenever we first set this up is that we were testing it with what was it? Menu data. And what I mean by
Yep.
menu data is like food menu data, not primary navigation menu data. And we were trying to make sure that students could connect and find food in New Haven. Like, where's a good pizza? Like, when are chicken nuggets available in the commissary? Like, all of these like various like questions that students have around food. That data is low stakes. That made it a perfect test. And what we found is that when we would type in, like, where can I find vegetarian food? We would get responses occasionally that would be like, hey, chicken nuggets are available at this location. And, I don't know about you, but chicken nuggets aren't vegetarian. And so we were like, what is going on? Why is it telling us that this obviously non-vegetarian food is happening? And the reason for that is that the relationships in the text, the way that the text was formatted in certain places, it listed, food options, and it listed the vegetarian food options very close to everything. And
Mm.
that made it like one unit. And so what we did was we went into the original content, we broke it out to make it more human scannable, meaning that it was easier to find vegetarian options in the content. We then re-imported that into the RAG, and we asked about finding vegetarian food, and we were no longer recommended chicken nuggets. So it was great.
Yeah. So I mean, these are all stuff that we're kind of learning, and we're learning about what are the limitations of it. I think the one of the lessons that we have here is like, so when we're talking about RAG and we're talking about AI here, we're talking about large language models primarily. And one way to think about a large language model is that it's like a calculator for words, and it's very good at that. But when it becomes like a kind of calculator for math, it's not. No, it's a word calculator, not a math calculator. So like things that we expect that a computer is going to be able to do well, it's without an intermediary step, the large language model is not going to be able to do it well by itself. So if you're thinking about like, oh, we have this whole big spreadsheet with all these numbers in it there, and it's like 30 like columns long and like kind of 50 rows, the large language model is not going to know what to do with that. It just can't see it there. So there's a lot of different things that we're learning and we're seeing.
So, Franz, I've got there are a couple of questions related to this. John and Amy both have questions related to the responses that come
Mhm.
from AI, and like how accountable are you for the information that AI gives out on these
Yeah.
websites? If you ask for vegetarian food and you go accidentally and eat chicken nuggets, like, is
Mhm.
Yale like culpable for that?
So this is so we this is why we've been very cautious with the rollout there, and we have other points of people and we have discretions. But the reason why we started with hospitality in the menu is because we said, look, this is something that's useful that we'll could learn from a proof of concept, but it's also not like really super high risky because there's going to be other check-ins. You're not going to rely on ASCII to like kind of determine some things, and we kind of say that. But what it does say is that it has this broader question about like, how do you kind of evaluate the accuracy, right, the reliability of something if you're not the subject matter expert. So this is where you have to, when you're thinking about like kind of instituting like a program for these kind of question answering bots or any, and this is agnostic to Drupal, if any kind of RAG architecture you're putting out to some of your units, you have to have a testing program that's run by the units themselves. They have to know what the questions are. They're going to have to be the ones who are kind of using the acceptance, like the user acceptance testing. It has to lie out on the at the end user there. So it's again like, and this is related to kind of our Yale Sites editorial, our larger content strategy. Our larger content strategy is you got to push out content decision making to like kind of the nodes of the network. It doesn't really scale any other way. We're not going to be able to roll these things out unless we take a kind of more like robust, decentralized nodal approach.
Excellent, excellent. So related to that, the next question is, any big thing like this rolling out on an EDU site has to have like a lot of like compliance or
Yeah,
internal governance
yeah,
to make sure that it is okay to roll out.
yeah.
And like, were there any hurdles that you had to overcome before like we engaged in this project?
So we're trying to share that. So ai.yale.edu. It's I want to. You can see this bot in there. You could also learn about like kind of the rest of the university initiatives. Kind of our data. Our We're seeing this as a data governance and cybersecurity thing going well. So we were, we kind of created these committees that are kind of that provided check-in and security, and we're kind of doing it with our, but we're looking at kind of like how do we do a distributed risk model, and we're looking through all those things, and we have those things in. um we ended up building partly on Microsoft because we had the Microsoft agreement in place already. I don't know. I think that allowed us. I think that's what one thing that Microsoft has been very good at, like their whole business model of like, oh look, you already have all the security things in place in there, and so yeah, so we were able to kind of leverage that. But we're looking and we're trying to define, like what are those strategies and what is and how do we kind of evaluate, and we're moving a little bit deliberately, a little bit slower in a larger rollout, as we kind of figure those out. But we if you go to, again, to plug ai.yale.edu, that's where all our communications, and that's where kind of what this rollout and some of the things that we're evaluating, it's that's going to be the hub for seeing what Yale's doing.
Excellent. Thank you. So let's see. I'm looking at my notes to make sure we're hitting all of the fun things that we want to hit. We've talked a lot about the challenges of um uh the procedural challenges at the institution. We talked about the content quality and how important that is. The technical implementation, we talked a little bit about Drupal, but let's talk a little bit more about Drupal. So
Sure.
what is it about Drupal that helps empower like adding AI to these sites?
Well, first of all, the content is a huge, and your data is a huge thing. No matter what, no matter if you leave here with one thing that's clear, independent, you have to have a handle on your content, and it has to be up to date. Whatever, like you have to have that. You can't. You're not going to have a successful AI program without that information. Drupal is kind of, the Drupal community is there. It's been thinking about this kind of questions about how to kind of structure and integrate kind of content with other systems, and I think everything about it is just like kind of tailored and really kind of great, for it. We're sharing everything that we've built already. So we have a code base that's available. If you Google Yale Sites GitHub, you'll find our code base, and you'll see kind of some of the AI work that we're doing there. And I think that we're looking at joining efforts within the larger kind of Drupal community, because I know there's like kind of be like a larger module effort where we have that, and figuring out how do we kind of coordinate, and we want to refactor our code that we're doing and systems we do to be with the rest of the Drupal community. But I think that like kind of if you start thinking about where it's going, it's going to be a lot like, if we could kind of like, if you're doing content and you're in Drupal and higher ed, some of the big pain points that we have are kind of issues with taxonomies and content and content labeling and standardization and understanding things. If we have AI in our Drupal and our CMS in the content creation point, not just to write things or give the summaries, but to say, hey, what categories does this belong in? What is this similar to? what other initiatives at the university should this person be aware about who's creating this? All these things are going to just start opening up to us. So it's very exciting, and I think that for me, Drupal is the kind of is going to be the platform for universities to collaborate on these kind of efforts. We have look, it's we just for network effects at all. Like everybody who's coming in here, everybody who's in university, so many of us are on Drupal already. Like let's all coordinate our efforts through this existing association and structure where we could kind of share our code and really kind of make universities much better. Because here's the real point, right? Real point is the world is in polycrisis, right? Universities are going to have to play a big role in stepping up and helping society solve these problems, and that the university is not going to be able to do this by only making a little bit of improvements at the edge. The university needs, and when I say the university, not just Yale, I'm talking about the network of universities. The university system needs to at least 10x, 20x, like an order of magnitude better to get effectiveness if we're going to solve like a lot of the crises that we have here. The only way that we're going to do this is with AI. That's it. Full stop. There's no path forward other than this path that we have here. And that's going to rely, like what the lesson I think we've learned is that a really good AI is going to rely on a system of really managing kind of all that content that we have here. So I'm very excited and optimistic and positive, like that we have a path here, because we have this mechanism of we're all on this software network, that we're together in Drupal, that we have this kind of amazing kind of new technology. So I'm really excited to see how the university system starts kind of collaborating and starts building a lot of new tools. Remember, the universities built the whole internet. So why can't we do the same with kind of AI?
Sounds great to me. I'm a big fan of open source and open source projects. In fact, like that's one of the big things that powers Fort Kitchens, like in our hearts, is making sure that we're contributing back to open source projects to make the world a better place in small and large ways. It's in our DNA. It's fantastic.
I mean,
So, Franz,
yeah, I remember the time. Look, like the very kind of idea of content management, like kind of within Drupal. I mean, Drupal is such a established, like it's such a, it's we should recognize Drupal's kind of like Linux in the global internet system, and it's there. I mean, and WordPress is great too. But I think I'm with Drupal because it's like I think it's like even lower level. It's cleaner that we have. It's just a little bit more open. It's a little bit more powerful for us to do things, and we're built into that system. But like this is not like this is it. Like if you look at the system that universities are going to use to kind of build this out, it's going to be Drupal, and then we're starting to see within the Drupal community about where it is, and I'm very excited that Yale is going to be committing kind of like human resources and code to kind of make this available to kind of our peer institutions.
That's fantastic. The Yale Sites GitHub. I posted the link in the chat for anyone who wants to have access to that. You can go and check it out and download a bunch of fun things. So Franz, one question that I have for you is, and maybe I can help answer this too, is if someone were starting today and wanted to like have like a project roadmap, like what would that look like? What do you think that would be at a high level?
I see there's a question. So putting together, first of all, I think the idea of the roadmap is very important there. So so we have, if you within Yale Sites, let me see. So let me see. I'm just going to go here. I'm just gonna go over here. So we have what we're doing again is like if you think about everything as being kind of like like this is a platform, this is like a SaaS that we're doing. So we made a huge kind of investment in there, and then we kind of go in with the release cycle, and like we can kind of tell our community about different things that we're doing, and then we kind of work with kind of a governance committee that we have here. I think when we look at something like what is the product roadmap for AI implementation, we'll have that delivered a little bit, and I'll live on Yale, AI.yale.edu. But the reality is right now, it's really kind of a lot of it is this defining what it is as a service. What is it like? What is like, and you have to like kind of, so we're in kind of the stage and saying, okay, we have this tool. What does support look like? How do we have trainings, and kind of like trainings are a big thing that we're trying to look at. Change management of, look, this is a radical shift in how people are going to do work. So it's going to impact everybody. How do we kind of communicate and talk about this in a way that's kind of allows people to kind of be comfortable with the change, and what is the communication strategy around that? The other one is that it's a lot of the for what we call like this search Yale Sites, it's tentatively codenamed Yale Sites Beacon, right? What like with that, the roadmap is really kind of iterating on and improving the reliability and the mechanisms of like kind of what the RAG architecture looks like. So we're looking at like when you do a proof of concept of something like there, you kind of just, when you build something like RainSys in 5 or 6 weeks, that's not something that can be operationalized. So it's not something that can be taken to scale. So your roadmap is saying, okay, this thing that works, how do we kind of make sure that we're not locked in, and we could switch out the API for like inference and compute, right? Like what vector database are we going to use, and how do we agностicize that? How do you have a system within the CMS that kind of allows people to kind of edit and change the system instructions to create the agent? So there's all these like kind of little features that you kind of have that like our roadmap really is like, hey, can we kind of get this all done, and can we get it to the point of release? When we release a product, generally though, we'll kind of have and say these are the next few features that we have in the future. And if you're going to say what's really coming, I think like since we launched last, and like what features that we probably need is multimodal. I think is something that people are going to kind of just genuinely expect. They're going to want to be able to take a picture of something, or show you on video, or talk, just like do things with voice. And all that stuff is shockingly easy because of the way like the development cycle is on this thing. It's just, the QA, the reliability, the kind of investment of like, what does it mean to support, what new questions does it all open up? So, look, universities are always like 15 years behind on the technology. So when we look at the roadmap, it's just like, hey, we can let our friends and who are on the edge, and then we could kind of go and say, okay, where do we want to kind of go safely and deliberately to kind of solve real world problems that we have here? Yeah. So
slow and steady wins the race, Franz. I mean,
there's no other way. That's slow and steady is damn fast for a university.
Oh, wow. It's kind of the opposite of a New York Minute. So we are in the last 15 minutes. I've got another question for you, Franz. But while we talk about that, if anybody has any questions that they want answered, please put them in the Q&A or the chat, and we'll get to them in just a minute. So Franz, the last thing that I want to ask you is, so we've have like a bunch of time and experience under our belts dealing with AI in this university environment. And like, if you had like, what are some red flags to watch out for? Like something like a learning experience where it's like, oh, I have to pay attention to this, or like, like giving advice to a friend who wants to get started with AI. Like, what are the red flags that you would make sure that they should pay attention to?
I'm gonna go back again and say, thinking that it's just the same thing: content, content, content. Thinking that you're not going to have to worry about your content, thinking about it's going to be a lot of that, like not having a system or content strategy, not having kind of understanding why you're building something, not understand your user over there. It's like a lot of the things that we've been trying to get people in the web space to kind of really think about become heightened within AI. I would also think about kind of, I think the other thing is sustainability, that you really like, this is something that you want to make sure that you're moving again to go into slow and steady is that you don't want to kind of get caught up in a flavor of the month and then having a lot of technical debt surrounding something. Like if you're going to offer something and you're going to make it available, it's there. I think if people here have been doing websites in university for a long time, we all know we have like these projects that are 15, 20 years old, these little web projects that were built that we don't have any way of like kind of sustaining or building. And it's like they just eat up so much of our time and prevent us from doing new kind of great work. So I would be kind of like, I would be saying, hey, what is the safe path? What are other people are going? What is something that I could build that is sustainable? What is something that I build that could kind of work with the existing systems that I have? Um, yeah, it just yeah.
There's just some great red flags to watch out for. I want to add one more to that list, and that is to have subject matter experts review and vet the service thoroughly, because in all of the years that I've been doing websites, it's usually like, create content, put content into the website. It's good, everything works out fine. Usually throughout a website process, there's subject matter experts weigh in on things, but they're not necessarily as active outside of like content creation. Like they're not actively designing, they're not actively doing information architecture or coding. But whenever it comes to implementing an AI chatbot on the website, your subject matter experts, the people who understand the content of that site themselves, have to test it. They have to ask questions and know what to expect from that. And then they have to ask questions that are terrible questions, and they have to ask questions that are adjacent or weirdly phrased. And that's something that we at Four Kitchens, we've put together a plan for that kind of like red teaming, that kind of testing, so that we can walk subject matter experts through it so that they're guided. But that's one thing that, for me at the very least, was unexpected as part of the process.
And I think that we need to figure out, we need to look and start ways that we could share some of the testing process, because that, I think that needs to be worked on. But like you're absolutely right. So to go back, like the blocker has not been the technology. The blocker has been the adequate QA for some of the like for reliability and trustworthiness of things that are very important that we want to kind of do. Like and you think about, and a lot of the risk is reputational risk that you
Mhm.
have. So like you're like um when you're building a chat for a health service, how are you addressing abortion questions? Like somebody asked that. So we had that, we did that test, we did that in our testing, and the bot started responding with court cases because it was indexing news articles that we had on the website, that they were just kind of getting status about Supreme Court decisions, because of the retrieval augmented generation, that became into its database. So we knew that we had to exclude certain information from the corpus of the database of which it draws upon, you know. We did testings, and we understand people might go there for mental health, and somebody phrased, said, I want to kill myself, and then that was flagged by our threat monitoring software. But do we want to have, we're asking ourselves a question right now, does that threat monitoring software that's of purpose there, but we're now with subject matter experts, or with it in a situation where that information, and that is we need to be careful. We need to kind of think about that, and maybe that the bot needs to be able to respond to that and direct someone to kind of mental health counseling. So because if you phrase it differently, the bot responded right. The bot said, you sound like you're in mental distress. I please encourage you to call this number. And so this kind of testing that we're doing here is really kind of the important thing, and working with a partner to kind of come up and to have a strategy about how you're going to get to subject matter testing, how you're going to get UAT here, is just really it's super important. Super important.
Absolutely. So this is the last call for questions. But I want to, while we wait for questions to come in, if anybody has any, I want to talk about what I think was a fun aspect of the initial project that we did when we were talking about like meal planning for students, and that was giving the chatbot personality.
Yeah.
So Franz, do you want to talk a little bit about what decisions went into that? Like you were talking about giving the chatbot some empathy in the right situation earlier, but what kind of fun stuff did we do for Ask Yale whenever it came to meal planning?
So one of the things that's interesting is that we wanted to, like, and it's a little bit a thing about, it's a little bit interesting about it's a little bit interesting about it's a little bit interesting, like, about the personality. We talked about personality and persona. So, with one of the things is we thought we would have like one kind of chatbot. We instead like, oh, it's a mega chatbot, but we realized that like every we had to give individual system instructions to there. And so like when we have something, the system instructions we're using for the Yale Health Bot, we know that the number one value was to have empathy. When we were coming over here to kind of this AI search and what we're doing here, we um, we we kind of wanted to give it a little bit of more, like, be like more, a little bit more bubbly, a little bit more of a concierge kind of things. So we said that it thought that Handsome Dan is possum, PAWESOME. We made up a word, possum.
And Handsome Dan is the dog mascot for Yale, right?
Listen, in my eyes, he needs no introduction, but yes, it's a funny nickname for a bulldog, because they are interesting. Well, they're handsome. So we could say, what do you think? Oh, like, I'm thinking of getting some pizza. And then what it does is it's kind of gives you a little bit of things, but because it says it uses a lot of emojis. Once we gave it a little bit of a personality, kind of the way that it kind of responds to all the answers kind of is tweaked. The phrase in the AI is, I think, is you put it in a different section of latent space is the phrase that they use. But but in the possum awesome Dan worlds, we love some emojis. We love some emojis.
Yeah, that's one of the thing about these AI chatbots that I really like, is that you can infuse them with the like correct level of personality using the prompts.
Yeah.
So Franz, we're about 5 minutes out from time. I don't see any questions in the Q&A or in the chat, so I'm assuming that no one has any additional questions. We've been answering them as we go along. Before we conclude, is there anything you'd like to share with everyone in the webinar, Franz?
No, I want to thank everybody for kind of coming in, like, kind of in their lunch hour or their early morning, to kind of come in to listen to us, and just I just encourage like higher ed web and like kind of there into the networks. Like when it comes to AI, this is something that we all have to be in kind of together about. And I encourage people as they kind of experiment to kind of share with others what they're doing. And you know, you could see us, hopefully find us in the Drupal community. They're kind of contributing there, take a look there, but also you know, let's try to be in touch, and let's really kind of try to do something really kind of special, because I really do think I think it's like kind of like, if you're really a technology nerd who's in a university right here, this is really kind of a special moment here, and I think like you could do a lot of kind of good there. So
Excellent. Excellent. For myself, I want to say that I will be at Higher Ed Web in Albuquerque here in just a couple of weeks. I'll be giving a talk about Ask Yale and doing AI with Yale with one of my fellow web chefs, Megan. I look forward to seeing everyone there. I am also active in the Higher Ed Web Slack. So if you want to, just kind of at me at Randy Ost. If you're looking for me on Drupal, I am Amazing Rando. And thank you all so much for coming today. If you have any follow-up questions, feel free to email them. I believe that you've got an email address. If you don't, my email address, or email them to shout@4kitchens.com, and we will get you answers to your questions, and we'd be happy to point you to all of the resources. Thank you all so much for coming today, and I hope that you have a wonderful rest of your day. And remember, Handsome Dan loves pizza and emojis. Goodbye, everyone.